So just quick introductions. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to see us today. I'm Warren Celiz. I am the Vice President of Sales, Solutions and Strategy for CBRE across North America. So it's been great to meet a number of you over the previous days, and I think the theme that we're talking about is probably what everybody's shared challenge has been throughout, and I think I described it to a few of you. It feels like this has been a group therapy session of how painful this problem really is. And just to paint a picture before we get into some of the detail, some of the solutions that we've got for this, change is slow and change is painful. Just because of what we say here doesn't mean we're going to make $1 billion of deferred maintenance and go, here's a $2 billion check. That's not the reality we live in. But there are mechanisms that we can do to start to chew away at the problem. I've got to point this there we go. So I'm not going to labour on this too much. I think we spoke about this, but there is a real balancing priorities right now across, and I really do empathise for everybody in this room with the challenges they're facing. Student enrolment's down, but the expectations of the student is up. They want more from what they're getting. Cost pressures are coming, and when you're trying to increase experience with cost pressures coming down and tackle a deferred maintenance problem, that's a real trifecta of a balancing issue to get around. And that reducing operating budgets, we're seeing the pressures, and that's the same of this sector and the same of every sector at the moment. So it's kind of how do we build that right plan for you.
Yeah, and one of the problems that we're experiencing is that the aging of the properties, the average age of about 62 years old. As you can see in the top right, there's a huge compression of when these assets at the properties are going to be end of life or require serious repair. And as we all know, deferred maintenance, it impacts everybody. As you mentioned, about $1 billion worth of impact there. But there's also these competing needs and priorities at your campuses. Unfortunately, getting a new chiller is not as sexy as a stadium or getting new lab space or getting a museum. And one of the other, the hidden costs of these aging assets, as you can see, is the amount of energy that they're using. I mean, you're spending good money after bad keeping these assets online.
So is everybody suitably terrified now before we start talking about the solutions to that and feel suitably overwhelmed? Because it is a real challenge, guys, and we do have some solutions to get you there. So first of all, why embark on this journey into the detail? The reality is, and the whole message for us today, is to look at the asset and the asset plan holistically. This needs to stretch from the facilities department to the project department to the real estate department. Now, whether your internal organisation is integrated, whether it's insourced or outsourced, that communication flow has to be integrated. If you don't have a holistic view of that, you won't start to hit the problem. And when you start to look at that, and when we talk about that in CBRE, we start to talk about total cost of ownership. Actually, that's where we start to see the 10 to 15% reduction in the entirety of the spend, as what we look at. And the big thing for me is if we can start increasing the useful life asset delivery while we're dealing with the deferred maintenance problem, we can start to smooth out that issue. So I'm a big fan of, in any FM delivery, simplicity and clarity so people can be held to account so we know what the performance would be. So the whole point of this is to take a step back and go, do we have the right foundation? And this 5-step journey is what we've been talking to our clients about in CBRE, whether that be actually in the higher education market or even in the private sector as well. It's very similar challenges, just the deferred maintenance part in this sector is a real unique one. So step 1, know and quantify. And we're going to go through each of these in detail as we go through all of this. What we're seeing is people don't have a full awareness of their asset list. The asset list they do have really only covers the big ticket items, not the churn, not the quantity of work that, as we all know, and we work in the trade, FMs are death by 1,000 cuts. That's what really hurts you in FM. So real clear, concise asset verification and condition survey has to be the bedrock of what we're doing so we're informed. Then into the bespoke and planned maintenance program. So actually, have we got the right skills, the right engineers, the right teams on the sites to deliver against those assets, and are we tracking those in the right sort of way? Now, many of you I've spoke to have got a variety of completely reactive tasks, unplanned maintenance, and a real variety. That's true everywhere, is the truth. But everything needs to be a conscious choice, is kind of our message there. Once we've built that bedrock, then it is into the capital planning. So it's built on a solid foundation. So now we are making educated decisions about our capital programs and how we invest that money most wisely, rather than it being reactionary of, oh, chiller's gone, let's go replace the chiller. We should see these problems coming much earlier. And then actually, and step 4 for us is kind of the wraparound on the data insight. And I see so many tools in the industry of technology tools. We have abundance of them, many in the other room today. Actually, do you have the right technology platform? But most importantly, do you have the right people operating on that technology platform? Do you have the right decision flow, maintaining that data to inform you of what's happening next? And then lastly, this is when the innovation comes in for us. There are some fantastic tools out in the industry now around the smart FM environment that can actually make you much more cost efficient. Now the reality, and probably everybody's looking at that slide going, well, I do a bit of this, I do a bit of that, I do some of that. Unless it's a holistic program started through that journey, in our experience, it will prove ineffective. And often what we're seeing at the moment is there's some really sexy tools, to use Will's analogy in step 5. People are grabbing them and putting them in the buildings really quickly to show some value, and most of them actually fail. So we're going to take a step back and take you through each of these parts of the journey.
The most important piece is collecting the accurate data. As you could see, even if you are lucky enough to have an asset list, the accuracy of it is probably about 30 to 40%. So it's very important to start with a solid foundation, as Warren mentioned, with concrete, accurate data. Tagging the assets for future use, as well as being able to use QR codes that can drive maintenance plans. And then the important thing is to validate that information. As we put it into our tools, there's a lot of context that goes along with the asset tagging. That's not just typical manufacturer. It's the criticality, the usage, the level of current maintenance performed on it. And then the important thing, it's not a one and done. It's a living, breathing document that must be maintained and adjusted as equipment is being replaced and being maintained. The reason we also do our QR tagging as well is, in many cases, it's very difficult to get this information, especially off of outdoor exterior equipment. We're able to put it in good locations where, again, a QR code could be used to collect that data and drive maintenance plans.
So I'd always describe step 1 on this. Everybody's got a version of that. Step 1 is laborious, it's unsexy, it's not a fun task, but it's the most necessary part of this whole program. And one line I always say to clients, and a lot of my living is looking at solutions and structures and how we make it more efficient. We can price and deliver what we can quantify. If you can't quantify the problem, you can't start to tackle it. So for us, even if the biggest takeaway, the most simple solution of internal teams, external teams, whoever you use, have to have that in place, and actually right down to the fan coil unit, the electrical panel at asset level, not just the chiller, the generator, the elevator. So in the identify risk and deliver stage, this is now actually some proprietary tools that CBRE hold. And the big thing for me, and when I talk to all of you and I meet clients across the country, I talk about removing emotion from FM. And often our teams and our structures, our supply chains grow by emotion of an issue. I don't know why I'm focusing on chillers, but I'm just going to keep with the chiller analogy from now on. Chiller goes down, oh bugger, need a new person, I need 2 HVAC techs, because I got really shouted at by the president. And we see this a lot actually in teams growing very much emotionally. One of our tools that we use is our labour loading process. So actually, and I'll take you through this, it's pretty simplistic and quite scientific in its approach. We have developed in our business, oh, got a bit louder there. We've developed in our business a maintenance log of every single asset that can exist. The optimum servicing level, the kind of medium service level, and the lesser servicing level. So we know the time it takes to maintain every single asset and every single skill set. So if we have that solid foundation from the asset verification, we can now go through, and I'm going to try and point on this a little bit. You can actually see on the screen here, on the top left, we can actually code every single asset to the bespoke maintenance time, the service standard it requires, and then we can start to alter that maintenance time. As we all know, a higher education facility is probably the most multi-use facility in the industry. You're actually a life sciences company, you're a research centre, you're often a stadium, and as you can tell, I'm not a native American, the size of the stadiums here baffle me. The fact that they're double the size of Wembley, just I can't get my head around. So you are such a multi-use facility. So if you have a generic asset strategy, it's not using your money most wisely. We all know that heating and cooling in the lab space is going to be much more critical and much more costly to your organisations than maybe the seminar room. So actually what we can start to do is, and I describe this as move the money and move the time around the building. So we start using the resources most effectively. So as you can see there in the criticality column, we can start linking asset time to criticality of asset. So we start using our money most wisely. And all of this is to deliver a defined planned maintenance platform. Because the basics of everything, if we service equipment, it will break down less and we can elongate its life. And then what this gives us then is the defined number of engineers that we need optimally. And then this is where it's a sit down with the, right, what are the access requirements? What are the challenges of the site? What are the issues that you can't just get from asset data to build your solution? But it gives us the gold standard of where we should be. And then what that can start getting into your CMS planners is your detailed plan maintenance program. So you can start shifting workload to make sure it's most efficient. Those of you taking pictures, we'll send all the slides to you as well. So you got them just in case, because there's not great quantity for you. And the biggest part of this is, for me, is to go from reactive to proactive. Now, everybody in this room probably operates along this spectrum and possibly on different buildings and different asset types is the reality. I would say the middle column is where we should all aspire to be, is the truth on this. If we do have the right balance between planned maintenance and reactive maintenance, and a metric that we use in our business is realistically, if we are operating more than 30% of our tasks in a reactive way, we are not being efficient. We seek to be 70% planned. Look, breakdowns are going to happen. That's the life we live. But we can move that to 70% planned over proactive, the way we structure our teams, and to build that asset list through. And once we have those solutions in play, we can start looking towards the right-hand side of the screen and some of the more clever solutions that can optimize them. But that is often the process we've discussed with you here, guys. It's probably a 12 to 18-month journey. It doesn't just change overnight. But the reality on this is we all buy in our personal lives. You buy something variably like that, costs a lot more money, is the truth. You've got a planned program ahead and you can see the forecasting of the issues. You can maintain your critical spares list and buy assets in the right sort of way. It is so much more cost efficient. So a lot of this for me isn't cost saving, it's cost prevention in the right way.
And one of the outputs, of all this data collection, and when we do talk about that holistic approach, is that lifecycle asset management, the LCAM. And it goes back to all the different data points that we collect, but also the criticality and the importance. I mentioned earlier about the competing priorities. We're not going to treat a lab space the same as maybe a seminar area. So all those different attributes are involved in when we develop, the maintenance plan and the criticality of where we're going to assign the resources and how often we're going to touch that equipment.
Yeah.
And then this is, we've been overused the word today, but one last time. This is the sexy slide. So as we know, when we go and try to get funding and we try to explain to CFOs and to get, release of funds, again, a chiller's, not going to get everybody excited. But if you can at least help them forecast and see where their money's being spent and where potential savings can be in the, reduction of energy use. We talked about, antiquated equipment runs about 30 to 50% inefficient compared to replacing it ahead of time. And there's also, all of the stress that comes along with equipment failures, unplanned downtime. There's nothing like having a seminar shut down or a lab shut down unplanned.
So if you think about where we are in our journey, guys, we're probably 18 months in, is the truth. But we've got the solid bedrock of what we've got and what we know. We've got a planned maintenance program in place with the right skill sets on site, the right balance of supply chain and self-delivery. We now have, because we've got the firm planned maintenance program and asset verification in place, a life cycle report that is relevant to what we're actually delivering and actually what we can adjust and deliver in that. The biggest part for me now is then the data insight that it gives you and the maintenance ongoing. Will said it at the start, that whole process can become obsolete very, very quickly if it's not maintained in the right sort of way. So the truth for us on this, and we have many technology tools and I saw many technology companies in there, this is actually a balance between me of having the right tool and the right people to actually operate those tools in the right sort of way. And actually it's where I started my career with CBRE. I was the person answering the help desk panicking when a generator went down, so I do feel your pain of when I first started on that. If you have a technology platform that can link those three processes together, so the top box that we use is Service Insight, which is our proprietary technology tool. That does all of your asset maintenance logging, so all of your work orders from a reactive and a planned maintenance task, through one point of contact. So we put a dedicated help desk and personnel that you always go through them. So they learn your portfolio, they learn you. So they know this building's a nightmare. And in most cases, this person's a nightmare and we know they're going to be the one raising issues. We know how FM works. That then links into your LCAM. So it's always updating. So it's an iterative tool. So actually, if we're working with our projects team and we can see in 2026, wow, we're going to be needing an extra $25 million. Right, what can we do on the planned maintenance cycle to increase our planned maintenance to smooth out that issue? That can become quite iterative. So the most important thing for me is just buying a technology tool isn't the solution. Having the workflow of the right facilities coordinators, and in our world we call them contract support, that are logging every single work order. Every call goes through the same decision flow, so it is categorized properly between plumbing, heating, the right location, the right asset performance. And then when the engineers are on there using their devices, which we all know dragging engineers at the moment to use those devices is a challenge, but dragging them to use that, so then the updates go back through the system. Because this is really going to start to inform us. And the reality, and the main message for me today to you guys is, it's tough, but it doesn't have to be as tough as it is. We can make ourselves so much more informed and make our decisions much more about business cases than emotion. And the simple analogy on this one, and I remember doing the job, boiler breaks down 4 times in the year, costs $12,000. The replacement, I look at the LCAM's $8,000. Easy sign off from any CFO. There are so many of those instances happening in your portfolios that fly under the radar. And the reality, and I find this in this sector especially, the big projects draw all the eyes and draw all the attention. The new build, the big stadium change. It's the $5,000 to $10,000 jobs. It's the small workload that is actually killing you. All of the workload, all of the money, all of the cost efficiency is in the churn, is what we often find. And then the reality for that is you can start to see that data in a certain way. So when you advise people, it is informed. That is the biggest takeaway for me, guys. It shouldn't be the way I describe it, and I talk to clients quite a lot, and I can see the difference between someone providing a business case for funding and change versus someone pleading for it. They please may I to, this is what we should do. And that's the difference. If you have those 4 steps of the process in the right sort of way, you can have those conversations in an easier environment.
Now, one of the big traps that happens when utilizing technology is the lack of a holistic approach. A lot of times it's piecemealed. We're picking up a technology piece here. It's something shiny, something innovative, and we pick it up over here. And a lot of times what we find is that they're not compatible. They compete against each other. And they actually, to what Warren mentioned earlier, sometimes we're investing in technology and it's not delivering. It's actually counterproductive. There's also, technology to help, the labor side, which is, the days of the clipboard are long gone. Filling out a form is great, but that is a very important piece of a data set that's underutilized, and data is king in maintenance, and being able to capture that data and be able to utilize it to make informed decisions is extremely important. And we're also able to help reduce, operational costs with sensors, occupancy sensors. No point in cleaning a conference room that nobody used that day, or vice versa, having a very busy restroom, and instead of having it on your regular schedule of 2 to 3 times a day, you're increasing the response ahead of time to reduce those complaint calls.
And the big thing for me is that actually our CEOs made a mandate to our business, because we want to lead in this environment, that 100% of CBRE accounts will have Smart FM on them, which was a scary line to hear from your CEO. Whenever a CEO says 100%, you get very nervous in any challenge. But the big thing for us, though, that is caveated with only when the first 4 steps are in place. We will not be introducing Smart FM or the sexy side of solutions until we know those first 4 processes are right, because then actually we've seen they fail, and actually it's a misuse of capital. And when we've got that, that's when it leads into the decarbonisation. And I'm sure everybody's a facility here has a commitment, whether that be 2050 for net zero, 2060, 2070. It's always really interesting to see what number was picked out of the sky by each department we've got, and we've got our same as well. Through that labour loading process, you can see, because we've captured the age of the asset, we've captured all the criticality and the condition, we can actually start to isolate the energy performing assets and non-performing assets, and then provide balance sheet funding for you. So you can start to fix those equipment. So if the data informs you, actually getting the capital and the funding, whether that be through your internal organisation or an external one, is much simpler. Most of the capital funding that we provide as CBRE under a business we part own called Adaptive is mainly doing low-level lighting and HVAC replacements. It's not doing the big, sexy changes. And actually that's making, again, back to that churn of FM, is making the material difference. So to wrap up and to make this real, and actually this is based on a higher education facility in California that is state-owned, we went through this process with them, actually, and we're still on the journey, because this is something that I think doesn't really ever end. So they were previously, before working with us, very much in what we called internally a body shop environment. They were buying their engineers from a third party, but they were just buying engineers. They weren't buying any of the processes, any of the tools, they're kind of left alone. We obviously believe that isn't the right way of operating, introduced account management, introduced technology to them. And the first thing we did was the asset verification. We found 70% more assets on their facility than they thought they had. So now it's allowed we've got the right bedrock, was the truth. And they said to us they thought they had a good grip of it. And the reality is, because we went to that layer below of the churn, is what they really saw. We then rebuilt the team, effectively. And the reality on this one, the headcount was about right. I think there was a few efficiencies, and it was around about an 80-person engineering team, this one. The reality was the wrong skills. The wrong skills were on the location. So actually, the leakage to third party was the biggest difference. They didn't have enough HVAC techs on site to actually increase the HVAC maintenance on site to reduce the third party. And we've all bought from the third parties variably. It's a lot of money, is the truth. So we could see that as a fixed cost in there. So actually, the biggest thing on this, though, then we now focused each engineer to their asset, to their building, and made them accountable for the performance of that, and that could be tracked. That, because we did that, gave them an LCAM. They had a 3-year LCAM, they now had a 20-year LCAM. So we could start to inform the teams about the maintenance changes for them. We're only in year 3 of this journey, so I can't tell you that's proof savings yet, because this does take time, is the truth. I think we all inherently know that will lead to a benefit. We introduced the contract support role to them. So all calls flowed through one person consistently in the same sort of way. Data was cleansed, because now what we could see, do I have an engineer problem? Do I have a supply chain problem? Do I have a funding problem? We could identify what the issue truly was, rather than being wrapped into, I need to save money and this is difficult, which is often the case. I think that the problems get generic rather than specific. And then actually, most recently, they had 35,000 alarm systems across their whole campus, which was crazy, that were spewing off left, right, and centre, and it was crazy. No one knew the issue. We categorised that into 12 categories through sensors and created a remote monitoring desk. That has reduced work order count by 1,000 calls. That effectively is an engineer's worth of time. So effectively, in time saving, that's around about, because it's California and a union, roughly $200,000 of time saving. So if you want to now chip away in building upkeep, that is money necessarily you don't have to lose. You can reinvest more wisely in your building. So the main takeaway before we open up to questions, guys, is a lot of those tools in there are probably simplistic, actually. I think people come sometimes with the big smart FM kind of is going to change the world. The reality for me is if you take a step back from your sites and reset, that solid basis of great asset information and condition, quantify it and know your problem. Look at your teams and your structures and rebuild them based on the right skill sets to the assets, to the workflow, to the condition. And this is where organisations like CBRE can help you. That then informs your LCAM in the right sort of way. So actually, the facilities, the projects team talk and integrate. Now, if you're an in-sourced environment or an outsourced environment, for me, that's the only way to lead to success, to drive this solution. And then do you have the right data and people wrapped around that to maintain that in an ongoing way? And then invest in the smart FM platforms, because then you know they are targeted to deliver in the right sort of way. And this isn't, as you can tell, CBRE's big crazy objective obviously is you to all outsource and say we're fantastic and give us all the work. This is relevant whether you're in an in-sourced environment or an outsourced environment. The process should be exactly consistent. So thank you for taking the time to listen to us. And is there any questions? We are in the way of mimosas though, so I'm fully aware that if there are.
Do you have any questions? All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.